we'll move on to our friend Malaiz Daud, who has not been feeling well, had a few preoccupations as well, but still has been kind enough to rush back home and join us just in time. Uh, Malaiz, just to give a small introduction again of yours because you joined late. Malaiz is, of course, the is a research fellow at Barcelona Center for International Affairs, but also a research fellow at EFSAS, and has been the chief of staff of Afghanistan's former president, Mr. Ashraf Ghani. Probably not something he would like to be reminded of, but Malaiz, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Junaid, and my regards to everyone. Yes, I was as chief of staff, but unfortunately, it was more than a decade ago. So I guess I'm okay. Anyhow, lots of interesting presentations. I think some of the thematic issues, if you particularly look at the literature on social movements or collective action, mobilization is the crux. It's at the heart of that literature. And I think one of the reasons why internet became such a key tool in Taliban's conquest in Afghanistan was that they saw the power of internet and social media in mobilizing people for their cause. Not only active participants in their so-called jihad, but also sympathizers. And this brings me to the issue of Pakistan and how people across the Durand line, some even kind of on the payroll of ISI, took part in a lot of the activities of the Taliban online. But some also inside, we had the people, the so-called peace activists. If you look at their Twitter profiles or Facebook profiles, they would introduce themselves as peace activists, but they were actively advocating for Taliban. So for mobilization purposes, one of the main limitations Taliban had based on their ideology not to present pictures, footage of living things, they did away with it. And they released pictures continuously in order to not only mobilize, obviously, individuals, but at the same time mobilize resources. So they produced videos, they produced pictures, and they became very active in social media. At the same time, they used apps such as WhatsApp very effectively when it came to coordination of their war. I don't know if you've seen this article by General McChrystal, who used to be the commander of US and coalition forces in Afghanistan. The name of the article is "It Takes a Network." So basically what Taliban did was they just announced their presence in social media, and then a network followed, something that Dr. Corona and also Dr. Other colleagues here have already mentioned. So they didn't have to do much because already the landscape existed. They just had to tap into that kind of a landscape. But it was not only them. So the anti-Taliban forces did the same thing with some obviously buy-in from the previous Afghan state, which was also frowned upon by the activists who active against the Taliban in their war. So at one point, it became a propaganda war between the Taliban and the anti-Taliban forces. And you would, for example, one of the things they did was they would run these trends in Twitter and Facebook. So they would choose a hashtag, and then they would mobilize individuals and try to make sure that their trend is the #1 trend. And this, the anti-Taliban forces were very successful. They time and again were able to mobilize more people on their side to make sure that they have the upper hand there. But there was interference by the Ghani government. I don't know if you know, our previous national security advisor was an IT person. He had particular interest in these networks. And at one point, even our government was known by some circles as the Twitter government, because anyone who was very active in Twitter, had a lot of followers, would either be goaded by our previous government or even hired in the government. Like his chief of staff um, was, and then later became his deputy. He was hired because he was he was, in their view, he was spreading propaganda against the government. So they co-opted him, brought him in, and then he obviously made sure that he was with them. At the same time, once both sides would mobilize and run these trends, they would start also reporting each other's accounts. And here, I guess these technological giants, their limitation in these kind of countries, in these kind of situations, are exposed, because a lot of our accounts of some genuine activists, human rights activists, were either shut down time and again, or they would be continuously harassed every time they posted something, even that had remotely to do with Pakistan and Taliban. And it continues to this day. And most suspect the Taliban do not have this ability and the capacity. So it's mainly the ISI and some of their paid agents who are taking care of that. Despite the fact Taliban is, and part of it is a designated terrorist organization, particularly the Khan network, they're still very active in social media. And obviously, I saw a question from someone, and many of the Trump supporters, I guess, they have an issue, they have an issue because they say if Trump's account can be suspended, why not of those who are affiliated with Taliban or the regime such as the Iranian regime. The second issue I'd like to talk about is briefly the transfer of data and technology from Afghanistan. The collapse of the Afghan state was so rapid that the Afghan state could not secure a lot of its data and technology. So Taliban have access to that technology. And as we know, some elements within Taliban movement are extremely close with ISI and the jihadi movements in Pakistan. So how this data, fingerprints, all that stuff is going to be used by Taliban in repressing in the future of those that are against Taliban, and even how it's going to be used by the jihadi networks and the ISI, that is a big question and potentially a huge issue. And then obviously you have states such as Iran and China who also have their own interests, such as obviously the East Turkestan Islamic movement, which has still a presence in Afghanistan, and how this data would be used by them. The last point I'd like to make is that it's not only a one-way street. It's the technology that exists in Afghanistan is going to be transferred to Pakistan, and potentially some of that technology even used by China and Iran. The technology that Taliban acquired, and we know that the Pakistan diplomatic missions have been active in acquiring technology from other countries for movements that are against Afghanistan and India. There was this recent really interesting article about how the first Taliban drone unit acquired its first sophisticated drone from China. And obviously the obvious suspicion is that Taliban did not enter a deal directly with China. It must have happened through Pakistan. And how that drone became a key component in their war against the previous government, and particularly the assassination of a key individual in the northeastern Takhar province, so that they could encircle the previous government and make sure that they cannot make inroads towards the north and northeast and have connectivity with Tajikistan and Uzbekistan, which is right now of key importance to the resistance, the so-called the National Resistance Front of Afghanistan, in Panjshir, 3 districts of the Baghlan province, and 2 districts of Kapisa, and 2 districts of Badakhshan province. So they cut that connectivity, and this drone attack of a key individual, a former member of parliament in Afghanistan, was the cornerstone of that effort. These are some of the points that I thought would be worth mentioning. If there are any other questions, I'd be happy to answer. Thank you so much, Jimmy.
Thank you, Malaiz. You told me you are very busy and did not have the time to prepare. Well, that is not to be, I think you prepared a lot of these details you've come up with.